Hello and welcome back to a firing range video on Forgotten Hope 2, well, or rather a beta update kind of video. So as many of you are, or probably most of you are aware, we are a mod. Even though we are standalone, this is not technically a real game, we are a mod of Battlefield 2. And that also means that some of the limitations of Battlefield 2 are also limitations for us, and for the longest time many of them could be fixed. One example of that, which many people are maybe not aware of, but which always really annoyed me, is the firing range, the firing rate limit that we have in Battlefield 2. I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's basically caused by the Battlefield 2 server tick rate, and that meant that we only had a certain range of firing rates that we could use. Namely, we could use, for example, we could set a gun to be at 360 RPM, rounds per minute, or 450, or 600, or 900, or 1800, and that's the highest one, that's one shot per server tick. So the problem with that is obviously that we often had to compromise because many World War II weapons have firing rates outside of those ranges, right? One of the most egregious examples is the MP38 or the MP40, which in real life, even though there were like production differences and stuff, fired at around 500 RPM, which we couldn't do in-game. So what we did at one point was we split it up between the MP38 here, which fires at 450 RPM, and the MP40 fires at 600 RPM, which is a lot quicker than the real weapon. In fact, this is, I think, the only weapon where we actually made the firing range or the firing rate faster than in real life and didn't make it slower instead. Another famous weapon affected by this, even though this is an MG34, but is the MG42, which famously fired at 1200, yeah, that's right, 1200 RPM, which again we couldn't do. So even though many people are probably not aware of that, all the MG42 light machine guns, you know, the ones that you have in your hands, in-game at the moment fire at 900 RPM, the same as an MG34. We just speed up the sound so you don't notice, and due to the high damage it doesn't really make a big difference, but the difference is there. For the static MG42s we kind of fixed that by having two weapons fire at the same time if you fire that, one of which has a different RPM, so it adds up to 1200. Problem with that is, some of you might have noticed that sometimes when you crash to desktop, which happens from time to time, you get that MG42 dummy ammo blah 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 error message, and that's caused by that, so it causes crashes, which is not ideal. Anyway, why am I telling you this? Just to depress you? No, the cool thing is our fellow dev Ekiso has actually managed to crack the code, so to speak, and he managed to make it possible to have 3 more RPM settings. We can now also have 514 RPM, 700 RPM, and 1200 RPM for the MG42. And in fact I will now load up the beta and we will check out some guns. And we are on the beta firing range. Behold, the MP40 in its full 514 RPM glory. I know, it's not very spectacular, and technically the gun is worse now, but it is more historically accurate. I will now show off real quick some more guns that have also been changed to 514, but it's not a complete list. 700 RPM option is mostly used for the Thompsons, which finally shoot faster than the German SMGs, like the MP40, like they should in real life. Which should make them a lot better. Usually I go for the Garand, but now... yeah, they pack a bigger punch now. And for shits and giggles, yeah, let's use the unreleased M1921 French Thompson, which fires ridiculously fast. Will probably be released at some point in a French map. And what you've all been waiting for, finally the full glory of the 1200 RPM MG42. I mean, you don't see any difference because the sound didn't change. Even 900 RPM is fairly fast, but yeah, it shoots at 1200 RPM now as it should. And even that guy's got killed. And lastly, for those who were not bored by this video, as a little treat, let's show off the Norwegian rifle that we recently released in a news update. The Krak Jørgensen, or Jorgensen, I don't know actually. Pretty cool and weird looking gun. Let's reload it real quick. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it, found it a little bit interesting. These changes, not the new guns, but the new firing rate changes, will probably be released relatively soon whenever we do a new, what's it called, whenever we do a new event, you know, like the D-Day event recently. So look forward to that. I don't think you will have to wait for these changes that long.